Welcome, everyone, to episode number 15 of The Mind Viking. I am your host, Eric Engberg. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button below. And while you're at it, please click on the little bell icon so you're notified anytime a new episode goes live. In this episode, I have as my guest retired sergeant and combat veteran Michael Carson. Michael suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, which is defined as a psychiatric disorder that can occur following the experience or witnessing of a life-threatening event, such as military combat. While serving in Iraq, Michael experienced firsthand the terrifying reality of combat warfare, having witnessed the killing and dismemberment of many of his fellow soldiers. Michael will tell you that in combat, there is no time to grieve. You bury it and soldier on. Otherwise, you not only put your own life in jeopardy, but that of the soldier next to you. Michael survived the battlefields of Iraq, only to find his own personal battlefield waiting for him back home. And no matter how much alcohol he drank or how many drugs he took, Michael could never escape the war that continued to rage inside of him. Michael has agreed to come on the show and share his chilling story. He will talk about his time in Iraq and what it feels like for a soldier to look death in the eye. He'll also share with us the devastation that PTSD can inflict on combat soldiers and their loved ones. And finally, Michael will talk about how, through the PTSD Foundation of America and Camp Hope, he and other combat veterans are finally experiencing healing from PTSD. Michael, welcome to the show, and thank you for allowing me the honor of sharing your story.
Thank you very much, Eric. And then again, thank you for having me on and being able to get this story out there. I really appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. All right, man. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. So, Michael, the day that you enlisted is a day that you and this country will never forget. Can you share with us the story or the circumstances around why you enlisted and the significance of that day?
Sure. So the day that I swore in, well, let me back it up just a little bit. So growing up, I grew up on a farm and a ranch, little small town in Bovina, Texas. Growing up on a farm and a ranch makes it to where we didn't go to the hospital unless you broke a leg, and you better be missing your leg in order to go to the hospital, because grown men don't cry and cowboys are tough, and so growing up in that kind of environment, it would play a role significantly on my future. I'll leave it at that for now, but it definitely played a role in what was to come. After high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a farmer and a rancher because it was real hard work and not very good pay. So I was going to college, and when I say I was going to college, I was at West Texas A&M University, and I'd had a scholarship to go there, and I'd spent more time in the bar than I did, in class. So West Texas A&M said, "Look, you ain't gonna go to school and make your grades. We don't think you ought to be here." So shortly after that, I went back home. Was gonna go back to work for Dad, and where I live, Bovina, is real close to the Mexico border. So right across the border into Mexico is a little small town called Clovis. And I went over there. I was dragging Main Street, you know, trying to pick up girls again. And I gotten pulled over. Well, excuse me, I had an unpaid seatbelt ticket. And so they had put a warrant out for my arrest and arrested me. So we got to spend the night in jail and, you know, got released out and got put on probation and had to do community service. Actually is what happened. So, I was doing my community service hours, and the guy there, he was like, "Hey, if you'll go down and talk to the National Guard recruiter, I'll put like 20 extra hours on your hours." And I was like, "Man, that sounds like a deal. Heck yeah! All I got to do is talk to a guy." So of course I went in and talked to the National Guard recruiter, and he did his job extremely well, talking about, you know, being able to shoot guns for free. You only had to come 1 weekend a month. We're going to give you a sign-in bonus. You know, just all this fun stuff was going to happen. And, you know, and this was in around February of 2001. So I went ahead and signed a contract with the National. I talked to my dad about it. He was upset that I was getting ready to sign up for the military. Because he wanted me to work for him, and I had promised him that I would work for him that summer. So, and he's a custom wheat harvester. So anyhow, he was a little upset. So I agreed to say, "Hey, look, I will do harvest with you," which custom harvesting, we were harvesting wheat, and that's June, July, and August is usually the time frame for that. So did a delayed entry program with the, you know, New Mexico Army National Guard. And ended up, you know, I got sworn in Amarillo and MEPS. So I was going to swear in on September 11th, 2001. And got to MEPS. Of course, nothing had happened yet. I went in to put my hand on the Bible, swear in, you know, swear our oath to this country. And as I came out, I looked over and I remember seeing on the television, of course, this is old school, flat screen, you know, huge, big TVs they used to have back then. But, you know, there was this, the World Trade Center was, you know, just on, not on fire, but smoking, you know. I was like, I don't remember seeing the movie to that. What's this all about? And they were like, no, a plane just hit the World Trade Centers. And I was like, holy, what in the world? Like, what's going on? And of course, I was in Amarillo, Texas, at MEPS, and so they locked MEPS down. I was supposed to fly out. They ended up locking it down, and they put me on a bus to basic training. And when I got off the bus, Fort Sill, Lawton, Oklahoma, the drill sergeant said, "Get off the bus. You're going to war." You know, and of course, for me, I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute, man! Like, this National Guard recruiter, he was telling me that I just go 1 weekend a month, you know, I get to shoot some free guns. He didn't say nothing about going to war." But it wasn't, you know, 2 or 3 days into basic training that they start to break you down and rebuild you up into this, you know, battle hardened, you know, warrior. And by the end of basic training, I was ready to go. I was like, you know, I'm the guy you want to see. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and that's a good segue into this next thing that I want to talk about. So you were stationed stateside until 2005, when you were then finally deployed to Iraq, and as you just said, man, you were ready. You were enthusiastic about kind of finally getting your turn to see some action and to make a difference. But that all changed at Camp Echo. So can you tell us kind of what happened there that kind of really just changed things for you?
Sure. So yeah, upon arrival to Camp Echo. So Camp Echo is in Al Duwaniya. It's in Iraq. Like you said, you know, I was gung ho. I was ready to go. I'd done some stateside missions and stuff. Operation Noble Eagle, Operation Clear Skies. You know, I became an instructor, but yeah, I really wanted to go, so I jumped on that mission with those guys. We were attached with the you know, the 82nd Airborne, an elite group of highly trained combat veterans for sure, or just veterans in general. Anyway, I'd been there about 2 weeks. And we pulled into camp. Now, on the way into Camp Echo, I was very new in country. And up to that point, it had been all training. It was kind of surreal going in there. So as we pull up to the gate, or before we pulled up to the gate, I had noticed a white van. We've been trained to look for these kind of things. There have been, a lot of IEDs up until that point. There have been a lot of vehicle-borne IEDs, suicide bombers. And I saw this van, and it was sitting on the side of the road, and it was really squatted. It looked out of place. It didn't look normal. But I didn't say anything. I was still young in country, and I didn't necessarily want to bring that stuff up. So I didn't. We pull in. We're getting some gear down and stuff. And I remember looking over, and I remember seeing this van, same van, and I just caught a glimpse of it going by. It was going through the serpentines at the gate, and two of the gate guards there. One of them was 18 years old. One of them was 19 years old. That was the first, that was the first death in combat that I was a witness to. It ended up being a 500-pound ammo bomb, suicide bomber. Drove it into the front gate, exploded it. I remember seeing it, and then I remember dust and this concussion, this concussion wave coming over me, and I took got my bearings about me a bit and looked back at the gate, and the van was gone, the two soldiers were gone. Huge, just it wasn't like what you see on TV. It wasn't like a huge fireball and all this stuff. It was just just smoke and dust and not just hole and everything. It was just a huge explosion. And at that moment, that was when I realized that it's real. This is combat. I could lose my life. And so, yeah.
So that enthusiasm, I mean, I would imagine just vanished, and now you're faced with the reality of the situation that you're in. You're a combat soldier, and you're seeing your first combat, essentially.
Yeah. Well, and that's also what would start something inside of me of, I got to a point, after that, firefights and being shot at and IEDs and EFPs, and I began to hate these people. There began to just be this real hate inside of my heart that I love my brothers. I did everything, and I would do everything to protect them. And it made me want to kill them. And no man should have that inside of his heart, to where you want to take another man's life. I hear discussions sometimes still to this day of people, saying stuff like that, like, "Oh, I'd kill him if it comes to me." Like, man, you don't know what that means.
Yeah. Michael, did you have that same feeling of animosity towards, the enemy or the Iraqi, the insurgents, before that incident? I mean, was it already there, or is
I wouldn't
that
necessarily say that? Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was the hate for him. Like, I wanted to go and defend this country. Everyone on 9/11 wanted some type of revenge for what happened. So or at least I did. I don't want to say everybody, but I know during that time frame, it was all over the news media. It was all over everything, that we wanted to go and freaking show that we are not going to tolerate that kind of terrorism inside of our country. And so, yes, there was that. I want to go and make sure that we're defending our rights and we're defending our country. So it wasn't necessarily a hate for a certain individual, like a certain group of people necessarily, but later on, as the deployment continued, I would create this hate inside of my heart to where, no, I didn't care if any of them died. I don't care if it's a woman or a kid or a man, and I wanted them all dead. Because of what they were doing to my brothers, because they were killing my best friends.
Yeah.
So,
and I remember that you told me that, you know, on missions when you guys were out, you know, it wasn't at all uncommon to come up on a Humvee that had been, you know, attacked, and so and you know, you'd look inside the Humvee, and you know, you would see carnage. You would see another one of your, you know, fellow brothers killed, dismembered. How? I mean, was that commonplace? I mean, how often did that happen? Would you say?
IEDs and EFPs when I was there were, you know, they were every day. Every day there was those things going on. Now, sometimes they'd go off early, sometimes they go off late, sometimes they penetrate armor, sometimes they wouldn't. But I mean, we had what they called a boneyard there, and the boneyard was where all the disabled vehicles that were being picked up were brought to. And you know, I'm talking thousands upon thousands of vehicles that looked like a shotgun had been shot in the side of it. And when I say shotgun, I mean like the blast of just shrapnel all throughout the whole side and everything, you know, burnt up. And you know, there was occasions where, you know, we see stuff like boots still in the floorboard, you know, part of the leg still there with the femur sticking up, you know, brain matter just splattered on the side of a Humvee. And you start to get numb to it almost, because we're called to carry on, to continue the mission. You know, there's a reason why we got sent through basic training and they're so tough on us, right? We have this internal just ping that goes off in the back of our mind that says, all right, you ain't got time for that. We got a Charlie Mike, you know, don't worry about that, Charlie Mike. You know, carry on, you know, continue mission. Charlie Mike is what that means. And so it's just continue. Don't feel it, shove it down. You got time to worry about that. And it's so seeing those things over and over and over again, you start to become numb to it, because that's how we're able to deal with it. That's how we're able to still go on and fight, which is very much needed at that time. You know, you don't, there's no time for, you know, a month of mourning or a month of grieving. We don't have that kind of time. We got a mission to accomplish and it's got to be done. And that's why soldiers are put on this earth. And that's why, you know, I had to do what I had to do, as same as every combat veteran out there. You know, there is no time to mourn that. And that's because we have a job to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, again, later on, which we'll get into, it takes a toll on your mind. It takes a toll on your soul.
Yeah. And we'll touch on that. So I did a little, you know, I jumped on Google and did a little research on Camp Echo, and I found a quote by a Sergeant Joey Palmatessa of the 194th Armor. And he said this: I'd rather take the fight to the enemy than get hit by an IED, not knowing, driving up and down the road, who's going to get hit, that uncertainty. It could happen any second. So do you know what he's talking about?
100%. You know, that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to IEDs or EFPs, is you just don't know when it's coming. As an infantry soldier, you know, I know what to do when facing an enemy. As soon as I start getting shot at, there's what they call battle drills that just are embedded into us. They're muscle memory. You know, as soon as if it's an ambush, if it's a near ambush, a far ambush, we know exactly what to do as far as flanking maneuvers, moving up on line, doing all the stuff that we got to do. We can see our enemy and we can fight them. When it comes to IEDs and EFPs, you just don't know. So it's just rolling the dice, man. It's a gamble. Every single time you roll out the gate, is today your day, you know? We do what we can. We have a lot of preemptive measures that go into place to try and prevent these things from going off. But it was just countering, you know. At first it was jamming radios, you know, to prevent them from having walkie-talkies or cell phones that set off the IEDs. You know, pressure plates and stuff like that, looking for rubble, looking for things that are out of place, looking for, you know, they use dead animals a lot over there. They'd stuff a dog with a 155 round, you know, and set it on the side of the road, wait for you to go by and then set it off. Tires, you know, I mean, just stacked up rocks, things that are just out of place, not normal, that we're always looking for. We're always on the lookout, but each day you don't know. Sometimes you might miss it, you know, and that's usually when it's bad, is when we don't catch it. So, yeah, I agree with him 100%. I would much rather take the fight to the enemy, shooting at him and him shooting at me, versus just hoping that you don't get hit.
Yeah. So Michael, after returning home from Iraq, you told me in an earlier conversation that you immersed yourself in your work as an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And then after work, you would basically drink yourself to oblivion as a way of dealing with the symptoms of your PTSD. So how did the symptoms manifest themselves in your everyday life? I mean, what did they look like?
So upon coming back, the world didn't look the same to me. I didn't view things the same. You know, whether I'd have friends lose loved ones, you know, and I'm just like, well, so what? People die. You know, just no heart, no feeling, no, I was numb completely. The problem is there were things that were coming to surface. For instance, it wasn't a week when I had gotten back. I was driving down the road. Excuse me. So yeah, about a week after I got back, driving down the road, and there was just a tire, like a truck tire, that was on the side of the road. I didn't even notice I had my family with me. I was driving, and I was off on the other side of the road on a 4-lane highway in the ditch. And my family was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I had no idea that I had completely gone across the road and tried to avoid that. So it was so normal for me that at that point that's just what I did. It was a natural reaction. So things like that on driving, people, crowds, always searching hands, looking for things out of place. You know, my mind was just taking in information all the time, trying to find the stuff that's out of place, and everything was out of place because it was not a war zone. You know, we're back home. But to me, I was still in that war. I still needed to look and find those things. And then, of course, nightmares, reliving and re-seeing, you know, bodies and just some of the atrocities of war, that just reliving some of the events that had happened, you know, going back to that explosion that happened there, you know, at Al Diwania, just not being able to get those images out of my mind, and be waking up, you know, in a cold sweat, wondering, you know, whether it was a loud noise, something happening. You know, I had one instance when we were staying at this little cop is all it was, but a rocket came in and you know, basically blew me out of my freaking cot. And so, you know, I would wake up and think that was happening again. And so I had a very, very hard time sleeping. I had a hard time getting along with people. I didn't like going out into public places just because it would wear me down. The anxiety, the hypervigilance, and then at night getting so depressed, so sad because I missed my brothers that I lost. I missed and I would ask questions like, why did they take him and not me? So in order to counter that, in order to get some sleep, I started drinking. Drinking's big in the military anyway. And even in America, anywhere you go, you have a rough day at work, you have a few drinks, you feel better. The problem was a few drinks eventually started to turn into a few more. And it got to a point where, at night I'd finish off a liter of Jack Daniels, just to be able to get a few hours of sleep. Wake up with a hangover the next day, same problems, dive into work to try to, one thing is why I dove into work so hard. One was to avoid things, but the other one was, as an instructor, I was teaching guys that were fixing to be deployed. And so I wanted to make sure that I passed on every ounce of knowledge that I had to try and save their life while they were over there. And the more I worked, the harder I worked at it to try and give them all that. It made me feel like I was at least doing something to try to protect my brother still.
Yeah.
Really just, started drinking heavily. Also, I got into a relationship after this. And but one of the biggest things is that's how we all took care of it. And
what toll did it have on your relationship? What toll did it have on your loved ones?
Well, when it came to the drinking, and so I got into a relationship with a woman, and she stayed with me. She was still young. She was graduating high school, graduating college with her bachelor's in nursing. And other guys had families that were there with me that were working as instructors with me. One of them being Sergeant Ben Griego. And so Ben came over to our house, and quite often we'd drink together, talk about stuff, whether it be war or just family or whatever. But one night in particular, he had come over, and he was struggling, man. He was like, dude, I ain't getting no sleep. I can't stop thinking about certain stuff. He was coming up on an anniversary date of the loss of a brother, and he's having problems in his marriage. He was angry all the time. And so how we took care of that was drinking. And I remember him telling me these things. And I was just like, man, just don't worry about it. It's just part of it, man. Let's just drink some more. Let's just drink some more, and more shots, and more beer, and more shots, and more shots, and more drinking. And we were supposed to be out at the range that next morning. And of course, we were WTC instructors, which is the warrior transition course. Weapons instructors, we're training these guys up. And so we shut her down probably about 1 o'clock. Had to be the range at 5. So we always had medics there that we could get IVs, and sober up. So didn't think too much about it. And I was like, man, why don't you just stay on the couch tonight? He lives about 3 houses down from me. And he's like, no, I'll just walk home, So he walked to the house, and I figured he got there safe, So called him up next morning. He didn't answer the phone. And I'm like, oh, crap, man, he overslept, So I was like, well, we'll go load up the range stuff, and then we'll go back and pick him up. So that's what we did. Me and 2 other guys, we went and knocked on his door. He didn't answer the phone. So we checked it, and the door was unlocked. And we walked in, and I remember Cohen, she was saying, that he thought he was hiding from him because he could see his feet sticking out of the closet. And come around the corner, and come to find out, Griego had hung himself that night. And it's one of those things that you don't forget. At first, it's kind of just in the back of my mind to just take care of it, right? Like call the police, and of course, they came out and they cordoned it all off and investigated the scene, and we were checking with us to see if there was any kind of foul play, which that took a toll on me too, knowing that these cops were looking at us like that we might have had something to do with it. But I blame myself for a very, very long time after that for not seeing the signs, for not doing something different with him, maybe bringing it up to my chain of command, the what if game.
So, you spent time with him the evening before.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, knowing now what you know, being that you've gone through, some work to heal from PTSD and have a better idea of what the signs look like.
Sure.
What was he asking for help? And if so, how was he asking for help?
So, given what I know now, I did the best that I could with the information that I had at that time. And I steadily remind myself of that daily, that if I could have done any more, I would have. All I knew was that at that point in time, all I knew was to drink at that point in time. So, knowing what I know now, I could give him a wealth of knowledge, and would have done so much more, whether it be bringing it up to chain of command, but also just more along the lines of hearing a story versus just trying to shove it down, not deal with it or avoid it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, and it's funny that it's not funny. It's just how this happens. But so yesterday, one of the guys in my group calls me up and he's like, "Hey man, I got to talk to you, and I was like, "Okay, what's going on?" And he was like, "Well, my neighbor that I've been trying to get down here to group, I just found him in his pickup, and he killed himself." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, man." And my first question is, to this guy, I was like, "How are you? How are you doing with it?" And he was like, "I'm okay." And I know he is at this point in time. Today we've had a longer conversation with him, his family. This Marine, he is a Marine. Did several tours overseas, Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the things that his wife was saying is he was just so angry all the time. He was just so angry, and he decided to sleep in his pickup that night. And then took his own life. And it's a steady reminder of what I'm doing, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I told the guy that was there, I said, he's been going to my groups now for about 2 months, a little over 2 months. And I said, you were the one that were meant to do that. God needed you exactly right there at that time to find him, because he knew you could handle it, one. And two, so that his little 8-year-old boy didn't have to see his father like that. And but there's still a little piece of me that dies every single time I lose one of my brothers or sisters, all because they're too freaking proud to reach out. They're too freaking proud to admit that they need help. They see the guy with no arms and no legs, and they're like, "No, not me. I'm not that guy," and I don't judge the man for it, because I was in the same boat, So now I do tell guys, to reach out. I do tell guys to, one, that they're not alone in suffering through these things, but two, that there's a different way to live. And I would love to have been able to have this knowledge that I have now and pass it on to Griego. But I believe in some way that it had to happen in order for me to be able to relate to individuals who have gone through the same things that I've gone through, you know, or are going through it.
Yeah.
And need to know how I've gotten past it and gotten through it.
Yeah. Yeah. How old was Griego? Do you remember?
30. I think he was 30.
Okay. And did you serve with him over in Iraq?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. He was over there with me when I was in Iraq in 2005.
Okay.
And he was a WTC instructor. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So you were, you know, in Iraq, you came back, and then, you know, things kind of spiraled out of control.
Yeah. Once Griego took his life, that's all I did was work. And like I say, I was beginning on a relationship. So, you know, and this woman would later become my wife. Um, and so, but I still was drinking heavily, you know. That's just how I slept, you know. That's how I was able to sleep was, you know, I never drank at work. You know, I never would, you know, take the bottle on the range or nothing like that. It was always work extremely hard all day long. And then once I got off work, drink to go to sleep, wake up that next morning, work all day long, drink to go to sleep. And it was just this repetitive cycle. Now the problem was the WTC program was ending. It was going back over to Big Army. And so I started looking for different still working active duty. And I found a job with it's called the 64 Civil Support Team. They're weapons of mass destruction guys. They deal with hazmat and stuff, all kinds of chemical, biological, radiological. So I had to reclass MOSs from 11 Bravo to a 74 Delta, which is a chemical specialist. And these guys were smart, man, like way out of my league, but I made it through the course. And in the process of doing that, you know, full-time job, me and my girlfriend decided that we wanted to get married. So we were married in July, and so it was July of 2009. We were married, moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we're living in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, actually. And I went to work for the CST. Still drinking a lot, but we decided we wanted to try and have a kid. So we started, you know, trying for a child, and then ended up going ahead and getting pregnant. And I was personally hoping that would change how I felt about things, because, you know, I'm still struggling. My PTSD symptoms were still very, very active. I just hid them really well. You know, I would mask them with humor. I would mask them with, you know, buying stuff or going out and hanging out with the boys, or, you know, drinking, you know, different ways of just, I was trying to figure out how to cope, but I wasn't doing it well. And it was getting to the point where, you know, I was angry. I was very, very angry. Come to find out, anger is a secondary emotion, but I didn't know it at that time, because that's all the military had taught me was, if you're sad, would use it, get angry and go kill the enemy, right? And so I found myself in a lot of fights. I would go to the bar and find individuals, and, you know, pick out the guy who was the biggest and baddest, or talking all the crap about how freaking awesome he could fight and all this stuff. And I'd light them up. You know, I would lay into them. I was combative instructor, so, you know, my knowledge of hand-to-hand combat was pretty extensive. And we don't fight to it's not like the cage, right? It's not like UFC. Like, I broke bones and wanted to, you know, crushing people's throats in, and, you know, physically doing horrible, you know, irreparable damage to individuals. And I remember that made me feel good at the moment, because I was so angry at myself. I was so angry at the world. I was angry at the situations. I was angry because Griego was dead. I was angry because my brothers in combat were dead. And it made me feel good at the time. But then the very next day, I felt like a total piece of crap for doing that, because I knew I could do that, and I went and did it. And so I thought that maybe by having a child, it would bring some good into my life. It would, and it did. You know, my oldest daughter, Grayson, she's my world, and she brought a lot of good, and it puts some balance in my life. It actually just put into my mind and into my soul that there's still good in this world. You know, you look around, you see evil everywhere you look, and so she and my wife were the good, right? They were kind of the glue that was holding me together. That and then drinking, you know. So I would end up getting a DWI while I'm working with the 64 Civil Support Team, and man, that really it hurt my ego so bad, hurt my pride, because up to that point I've been an upstanding, you know, citizen as well as an outstanding NCO in the United States Army. You know, I was fast track and doing really well, and once I got that, it hurt me. It hurt me bad. It hurt my pride. It hurt my ego, and I wanted to run from it. So I found a mission going. It was a NATO mission going over to Kosovo, and I jumped on it because it was easy for me to escape having to deal with the repercussion of getting a DWI. So I left my wife and child there at the house, you know, and jumped on a deployment, thinking after the deployment, everything would be back to normal and be fine. So that's not exactly how that happened, though.
Yeah. I remember you telling me that, after about 4 months, that peaceful mission turned hostile.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
So got over to Kosovo. I was supposed to be doing urban operations and hand-to-hand combat instruction as far as being an instructor for that, which is actually really cool, man. I had like a nice hooch. It was a peacekeeping mission. Like we had TV. It was nothing like Iraq, you know. So I was like, man, that's a pretty cush mission. Good food, you know. Don't have to worry about doing too much, you know. Just basic stuff. Brought in sim rounds and the ultimate training munitions and stuff over from Germany. Set up a whole shoot house, running guys through. It was awesome. But the Kosovo government was trying to they're trying to establish their government over there, and they're between Serbia and Albania. And you know, Serbians and Albanians have been at war since biblical times, and so the Serbians were bringing goods over into Kosovo, and there was a northern gate there. It was kind of the only access point. I mean, it was the only access point with a road back and forth. And so NATO had been running K4 stuff up there where they had some ULIC soldiers that were guarding the gate between Serbia and Kosovo. Kosovo decided they want to start collecting taxes on goods that Serbians were bringing in. Serbians got pissed off about that, and a bunch of guys dressed up in black balaclavas, you know, to hide their identity and stuff, all black clothing, went and burnt the northern gate, just plumb to the ground, killed all the ULIC soldiers there, rolled the vehicles off the cliff, burnt them up, and so the ULIC soldiers, they called us in, you know. I was part of a crew called the Combat Arms Training Company, and we were the guys who instructed the soldiers on pretty much everything. We didn't do a whole lot of garrison stuff, I'll say, more field stuff. So all of your weapons instruction, hand-to-hand combat, urban ops, all that kind of stuff. So of course they wanted to send us in, and they were like, hey, you need to go kick in some doors over here and find these guys and find out where they're at and who they are, and we're going to re-secure the area, and we're going to take it over as the Americans. And it's a joint force deal over there. So it's, you know, Germans and Polish and Italians and I mean, we had multiple different countries over there working together, you know, as one. So, but they sent the Americans in. So we helo in there, and we ended up not finding anyone that day. We kicked in some surrounding. We basically went to suburban ops and had some support by fire elements and stuff watching over us as snipers and whatnot. But it was we didn't really find anybody. Kicked in a few doors and whatnot. Took it over, and then we brought in some infantry guys that were there with us, and they kind of held it down for a few months. But it was locked down to where nothing could come in. So the Serbians now couldn't even come into Kosovo. And that's when they started, they blocked some roads. We did like 258 sling loads. I mean, we were just getting goods back and forth and whatnot. But the biggest thing was that was a peacekeeping mission. And so, rules of engagement over there were nothing like Iraq. Iraq was, shout, show, shove, shoot. And when you got to Kosovo, it was, if you kill anybody, you're going to go to Leavenworth. So, we had a lot of riot control stuff, but the big thing was they decided to build a new road further down, not very much further, but a little bit further down. Kosovo let it happen. Once they got the road built, we took it over. Once we took it over, that pissed them off, so they started a huge riot. And we went out and, the ones that were causing the biggest problems, it tied them up, brought them back, turned them over to ULIX and whatnot. But once we had that part taken up, and they sent us in to go take that part of the road over. And by this time, the crowd had grown. It was probably 30, 40 people, and there was like 18 of us, plus some Germans and things of that nature. So, and we took the road over. Everything seemed kosher. We pulled back. And right at about the time that the birds coming in came pick us up, there was a big dump truck that came in, and I'll never forget it. It had this cable that was kind of tied. It was tied to the back, but they had it kind of wrapped around the side of the truck, and it had 3 hooks in it. And of course, we had put up 3-strand concertina wire all the way around. And the concertina wire is razor wire. It doesn't break real easy. Most of the time, it just stretches. And these guys went and pulled around, and then what they were going to do is throw that hook, throw those hooks inside the concertina wire and try to pull it off with the dump truck. So our commander, colonel at the time, he was a major, Major was like, "Hey, we can't let that truck do what it's going to do." So we did a little quick snap, Hey, we'll let the Germans push the crowd back. We'll go take the truck over, get these guys out, flex cuff them, and get them back over here. Okay, cool. So we go to push out, and the Germans didn't go. And so it was just us. And by this time, that crowd of 20 or 30 had grown to about 200, maybe 300, and was continuing to grow. They were coming in by the busloads. So the guys driving this truck were wearing black balaclavas. And we knew they were combative, and we knew it was going to get, we saw their weapons, so we knew it was going to get, it could get bad, but we thought, we had enough guys there to take care of the situation. I was supposed to go around the backside of the truck. My buddy Solano was supposed to go around the front. He was going to drive the truck. By the time I got around to the front, I looked over and I saw there was about 3 guys on top of him. He was on the ground. They cut his sling off, and they were just just beating him to death. And I pulled up my weapon system at that time, and about the time I pulled up, I grabbed the front end of my weapon, and I couldn't go to my secondary. I hesitated for the first time in my whole life because I was scared to go to Leavenworth, plain and simple.
Yeah.
I'd never been put in that kind of vulnerable state before. Within less than seconds, I had 6 guys on me, dragging me by the back of my Kevlar waist, beating on me with, I don't know what, but beating the living crap out of me and dragging me into this crowd. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna die. This is it. I'm done." And I did everything I could to punch, fight, anything I could to try to get away from them. But, when you're fighting for your life, And there's, it doesn't matter if it's a 135-pound Haji. If you're fighting for your life, that guy's, 300 pounds at that point. I don't care how badass you are. When you get 6 of them on you, you can't get them off. And
what's going through your mind at that time? I mean, obviously you're like, shit. I mean, because by that time,
a lot of slow motion. Everything slowed down. It seemed, it was just real. Everything was real slow. I was doing everything I could to fight them off. But in my mind, I was like, I'm going to die. This is it. I'm going to die. I just knew it. And luckily for me, there was some MPs with us on this particular mission. He came around. I just remember seeing the barrel of his gun come in front of my face. And next thing I know, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and then my head came up. And, at this point, I hadn't heard any of the gunfire. I hadn't heard any of it. And as soon as my head came up, I could hear gunfire coming from all over, explosions. And it was within a couple of seconds that a pipe bomb was, doubles the size of, a Coke can basically put together. If you put 2 Coke cans together, that's about the size of it. And it was within feet of me, explodes. And somehow during that whole time, that thing went and exploded. Of course, it blew me sideways, but I had there was another MP that was there, and it caught the back end of his legs. And I still to this day have not, other than just plain miracle, that shrapnel missed me and got him. And so, of course, we get back in to the fight, or I got back into the fight after that. We ended up actually securing the truck, getting it around. By this time, there was fire. The firefight was on, and we were laying down fire. Now the problem is when you're engaging in situations like this, and there's so many civilians that are there, that whether they were quote unquote innocent protesters or not, bullets go through people. That's just a fact. And we secured the truck, and we got it back inside and took control of it. Got things kind of locked down. The crowd scattered, and of course by now the ambulances and stuff are coming and picking up bodies and helos flying in with a bunch of infantry guys on it. 4 birds. That's the best sight I've ever seen in my life, by the way, is 4 Blackhawks with weapons hanging out the side, plumb full of infantry soldiers. I was like, ooh, we are saved, boys, because we were set up. We pulled back and set up, laid down across. We were cross loading. We're doing everything that we needed to do. Raking each other, checking for holes. The 2 guys that got hit. They had them back, checking them out, bandaging them up, getting them all, Anyway, a couple of days later, I remember, we had television, like I said, and I remember seeing on the news, and it showed us during that firefight, and the news had twisted it to make it seem like we were just opening up on innocent civilians. It showed kids and missing legs, and kids, shot, and women shot, and people dead, and there were, the deal on the bottom, which it's from that country, they're like, the Americans opening up on innocent civilians, killing innocent civilians for no reason. So
it was their media. It was their media.
It was their media that was showing all this stuff, and it was it was hard to get that out of my head, seeing that, and I'm like, that's not how that happened. That's not what happened, but it made me second guess. I'm like, well, did that happen? No, we took well-aimed shots. I know we took well-aimed shots. President Obama himself called our colonel after that firefight was like, you tell your men thank you for not turning that into a bloodbath, because they had every right to. We did our mission. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. We did what we were trained to do. But at the same time, those images don't leave your mind. The fact that you had to do the things that we're asked to do in combat, the things that we're asked to do in war, they're needed. We need soldiers. We need soldiers that are willing to be able to put their life on the line, to protect our way of life, to protect our freedoms, to protect the way we want to live. But it takes its toll. It definitely takes its toll. And so I had several injuries from that. Of course, my wife at the time had received a Red Cross message, saying, hey, your husband's been shot in combat, got into a firefight. I didn't talk to her for like 2 days, and she's freaking out by the time I do talk to her. And I'm like, no, I didn't get shot. So-and-so got shot. I got blown up, got drugged into a crowd by the back of my head. And so I had some serious neck issues after that. Turns out it was my C2, C3, going into the T's, basically the one between the C and the T, whatever that terminology is, but was herniated and torn discs, and which created it created a lot of just tingling and numbness all throughout my hands and stuff. And I was like, well, hey, is this going to get better? And they're like, well, yeah, dude, build the muscles around it and stuff. And of course, I still got issues, basically. Yeah. But I did the best I can. Anyway, we finished up and finished out that mission, came back home. And at this point, man, I had lost all regard for human life in general. I was numb to stuff. I was extremely angry just at the world. I was just mad. I was like, there's just so much evil in this world.
And Michael, I remember you telling me that, for the first time after that incident, you kind of, started questioning what you were really even doing, in the military, and being put in that vulnerable of a situation really started, to make you question, kind of, the military and, and kind of what you were doing there.
Yeah. And it did. It's very difficult to describe, really, because it's not whether I question whether or not I should be in the military. It's I question more along the lines of is there a God? And if there is, I don't want nothing to do with him. If he's going to allow this kind of evil to take place, then I don't want nothing to do with him. And that's more what I was getting at. Whether it's not whether I just wanted to be out of the military necessarily. It was just more along the lines of I questioned my faith.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, man, you come back from Kosovo, and things have only gotten worse. And if I have this correctly, was that kind of the first time that you experimented with cocaine? And no. Okay.
No. So I was still in the guard at this point. I'd gone to regular, just traditional soldier by now after 14 years active. So traditional guardsman. I was trying to find my way, trying to find something different. There wasn't really any deployments going on, so I couldn't hop in on one of those. But I dove back into drinking. Now my daughter, I wouldn't drink around her. I wouldn't drive with her, drunk or anything like that. Wouldn't be drinking around her, but I would literally be waiting on her to go to sleep so that I could start drinking. So really that's when the drinking started to get completely out of control. Now, me and my wife at the time, we figured that we would have another child, and maybe that would bring some wholeness. You know, I've already experimented with that once, maybe another kid. So it was at this point that I would have Hadley, my youngest, and it did for a little bit too. It helps, you know. Children are so innocent and so, you know, not, they haven't been corrupted by the world and all that. So it worked for a little bit, but at the same time, my drinking was getting completely out of control. My anger I was, man, such just a short fuse on everything, whether it be with my kids. You know, I would just get, you know, I remember several times my ex was like, you know, wife at the time, she was like, man, we're not your privates. You know, we're not a private in the army. You can't treat us like this, you know. And my, of course, answer was, "Well, stop acting like one," you know. But that didn't go over very well with her, of course. Needless to say, drinking was my outlet. Anger. I was still hyper vigilant. I was still, you know, always watching hands. Couldn't get comfortable. Couldn't stay still. Couldn't stay in one place at one time. I mean, literally, I was a walking poster child of what PTSD is. I just didn't want to go get any help. And she kept saying, "Hey, you need to go talk to someone. You need to go, you know, just talk to somebody." And I'm like, "No, I don't. I don't. I've got my legs. I've got my arms. You know, I'm good. I'm not the guy who has PTSD. I'm not gonna. I don't even want to be labeled with that." And that was a lot of pride and a lot of arrogance on not wanting to reach out for help because I didn't want to admit that I had a problem. Yeah. Not just with drinking. I was using drinking as a masking of what was truly going on inside of my soul and inside of my heart, inside of my mind. And it was at this point I would go to. I tried college. We moved to Lubbock, Texas, and went to Texas Tech University. And I said, well, maybe I can get an education and change my career field, and that'll help. Well, it didn't. You know, it didn't matter where I went. I was still drinking. I was still angry. I was still hypervigilant. I still don't want to admit that I had help. And so while going to college and working, or started working some, and going into the civilian world, working after combat and being in the military is, man, like it's different, that's for sure. I didn't handle people well. People show up late to a job. You know, I went from a trash guy to a foreman to a superintendent of a custom home builder. And you know, the guy hired me super, I mean devout Christian, just a super awesome guy. And you know, he hired me because I was a combat vet, and I worked extremely hard and I did really well. But you know, roofer would show up late and I'd be like, "You're fired." He was like, "What do you mean I'm fired?" I'm like, "If you don't want to show up on freaking time, you know what? If this would have been combat, you could have cost somebody their life. Get out of here. I'll find somebody who wants to work." You know, and my boss comes up, you know, and he's like, "Dude, you can't just fire people like that." Like, I'm like, "Well, if he would have showed up on time, he would have kept his job," you know. And so we went through this back and forth stuff, and honestly, it was hard dealing with people. It was just really, really hard. It was different. It was difficult because of the background that I had come from, you know, because of the military.
Right.
So still drinking. I come home one day from work, go into my garage, cracking open a cold beer about 2:00 in the afternoon. And my wife at the time came out and she was like, "Really? You know, this is, what are you doing? You're going to drink?" And I'm like, yeah, I am. And we got into an argument. It escalated. You know, I kept drinking, kept escalating. I kept getting angrier. And she was like, "I don't know why you won't just tell me something. Tell me, you know," because I never would tell her what was going on. Not really. And I was like, "Okay." I got drunk enough one night, and I said that night, and I said, "All right, you really want to know?" Every night when I go to sleep and I wake up the next morning, I want to go out to my pickup. I want to take my 1911 45. I want to put it to my head and I want to pull the trigger. And she was like, "I wish you would." And at that point, I realized that I had driven a person to the point to where they didn't even want me to live. You know, I put my family through so much. I started pushing them away. I started, I didn't even know how to protect myself from myself. And so it wasn't too long after that we moved to Austin, trying to get away from the individuals that I had been around at that point. A lot of college kids and drinking and stuff like that. But Lubbock was a familiar town for me. So, we decided to move and possibly get a job, in the Austin area. We were there for about a month. We moved in with her family, which was a horrible idea, and everyone told me it was. But I would find out just before moving to Austin that Solano, who just so happens to be the guy I came around the corner and I was supposed to protect. I got the call that he had shot himself, and I began to just, every single time I lose one of my brothers to suicide, it's just a little piece of me dies every single time. And in order to cover it up, I kept drinking. Moved down there, tried to stop drinking because I wanted to make my wife happy. One day my father-in-law calls me up telling me how much of a piece of shit I am and how much of a bad dad I am. And what he was saying was true. I wasn't being the father that I was supposed to be, I wouldn't go deal with my traumas. But he spoke ill of Solano that day, and it set me over the edge. It pissed me off to the point where, I told him I was going to beat the living shit out of him, basically. And he told me he doesn't use his fist anymore, And I was like, look, if you pull a gun on me, you better freaking kill me. Because if you don't, I'm going to take it away from you, and I'm going to kill you with it. And I was headed over to go do that. Called my wife and told her, I was like, look, if your dad's at the house, I'm going to kill him. Tell him that he doesn't need to be there. And if you can get a hold of him, you need to tell him to leave now, because if he is there and he pulls a gun on me, I'm going to kill him. And I know I would have that day. I let another man pull my trigger, and what he was saying was true, but it hurt me. And, what he was saying about my friend was not true, but I allowed that to push me to the limit. He was trying to call my bluff, if you will. And that day would have ended up costing him his life had my wife not got off the phone and called the police department. When I got there, 6 cops were waiting on me. Took me to jail for terroristic threat on a family.
She knew. I mean, she knew how enraged you were, and that you meant what you said. That,
Yeah, if he was there and pulled a gun on me, I had every right to protect myself. And as any man does, really. But the problem with the cops, when they showed up, I was very friendly with them. I had no resistance or anything like that. I was like, look, the situation, here's what it was. And he was like, well, it sounds like, just talking back and forth. And the cop was like, but you don't have anything, no text message or no. I was like, no, we were talking on the phone. And my wife at the time had recorded my phone call. I didn't record mine in her dad's phone call. So there wasn't self-defense for me, even though it was self-defense for me, or would have been self-defense if he would have been there and pulled a weapon on me. But it taught me something that day, and I didn't learn it until later on. And that is, we have to be careful what we say, because words are very, very powerful. And what I was saying that day, it scared that family, to the point to where they were in fear of their life. Now, for me, when I got in front of the judge and he said the words terroristic threat, I took it as a terrorist. And I was like, listen here, buddy, talking to the judge, I was like, you better watch what you say. I ain't no freaking terrorist, And he was like, whoa, Mr. Carson, calm down. I was like, don't tell me to calm down either. You just called me a damn terrorist. I ain't no terrorist. He's like, no, that's not what it means, sir. It means that you scared someone to the point of they were in fear of their life. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, he probably should have been. So needless to say, that would start me on my journey to getting help. It took me going to that to start saying, you know what, maybe I do need to listen to my wife and go get the help that she's been asking me to get. So I checked into a VA facility in Waco. It was a 2-month inpatient. And about halfway through, I was served my divorce papers. I had finally gotten to where I would go get the help that I needed, and was now going to lose what really meant the most to me, which was my family, my girls. So I started focusing on that more than focusing on myself. I would end up graduating that program, and within 6 weeks, I was doing the exact same stuff that I was doing before while going through a divorce. I moved back to Lubbock, Texas. I knew where to find drugs at that point. Once I had gotten my divorce, I didn't really care anymore. So that's when I would start experimenting with cocaine, because cocaine would, all of my symptoms were still there. I still had PTSD. I still had the hypervigilance, the nightmares, the homicidal, suicidal ideations, the depression, the anxiety. All of the symptoms of PTSD were still there while going through all of this. And they did give me some coping skills, but I had no way of staying connected with those people. I had no way of anybody holding me accountable, saying, hey, are you doing these things that you're supposed to be doing? So I went back to what I knew, which was drinking. And at that point, I didn't care anymore. I wanted to drink more to numb the pain, but at this point, drinking wasn't numbing the pain anymore. It wasn't helping me go to sleep. So I figured if I didn't want to go to sleep, I could use cocaine. Cocaine would help me stay awake where I didn't have any nightmares. So I started experimenting with it, and it worked for a little while, but it wasn't enough. So I found a guy who was dealing in methamphetamines, and once I started taking methamphetamines, there was no turning back after that. Once I started, methamphetamines is one of the worst drugs. Next to, all drugs are bad. I'll just say that. But it was very, very bad for me because it pushed my paranoia to a whole new level. It pushed my anxiety to a whole new level. It was doing its job. It was keeping me awake, and I could drink to go to sleep. I'd stay up for 3 or 4 days, and then I would drink to go to sleep. I didn't have a will to live anymore. And I started thinking to myself, maybe Griego had it right. Maybe Solano had it right. Maybe it's just better off if I don't be on this earth anymore. Nobody wants me. I don't want to be around people. I've isolated myself in a drug house. I isolated myself in a room. People knew not to come into that room or I would shoot them. Had my guns laying out, my bottles. Hadn't showered in 2-3 weeks. I had a bunch of VA medication at this point. So I took every single medication that the VA had given me. I did about a 8 ball of methamphetamines and I drank over a gallon of liquor because I didn't want to live. Yeah. Something that I'm still not proud of. I'd wake up 3 days later because no one would come and check on me because I had pushed my family and everybody that I had cared about away. I'd messed myself, vomited all over myself. I was, at the lowest, the worst part of my life. And I spoke earlier about my faith and losing it. At that point, I was so angry to God that I yelled out to him and shook my fist and screamed at him saying, why don't you just take me out? Why won't you let me die? And as it turns out, God had another plan for me. I would hear the guys that lived in the house say something to the line of, I'd gotten out of the bathroom, come back into my room, and they were like, that dude needs God or something, and I was like, you know what? Maybe that is what it is. So I downloaded the YouVersion Bible app on my phone, still half high and completely out of my mind. Cracked open a beer, of course, because I was going to go back to doing what I knew. And I was about to go re-up at this lady's house. This is where I got my drugs from. And I opened up that app, and the very first verse that came up was, "Do not go back to the woman's house." And I freaked out. I was like, there ain't no way that could happen right now. Somebody's watching me. The FBI is after me. ISIS is setting up something on the side of the road. You know, like somebody's gunning to kill me. Paranoia kicking in, plus drugs and everything else that I was on. But I was like, there ain't no way. And so I sat for a minute and I was like, well, let me look in the Bible and let me see if that's what it really says. And sure enough, that exact verse was in the Bible. It was talking about the promiscuous woman in Proverbs. I didn't know this because I had to study the Bible, you know. And I was like, holy crap. And so I did end up going and getting, you know, some more drugs that night. My body was at a point to where I couldn't just get off of the drugs. So I did, but I kept reading. I kept reading scripture. I kept reading devotionals off of that Bible app. And a couple of days, I called that guy I was telling you about earlier that I worked for. And he, you know, custom home builder there in Lubbock. And I was like, man, can you pray over me? I can't tell you what I'm doing. I don't want to tell you what I'm doing, but can you just pray for me? And he was like, I got a better one for you. Why don't I take you to lunch? You know? And so I agreed to meet with him, and we ate. I didn't really eat much, but, you know, I was in a bad spot. You know, I was high, you know, and we don't eat when we're high because our body doesn't need it, or at least we don't think it does. And after we got done, we were sitting in his pickup, and he, you know, he prayed over me. When he got done with his prayer, he said something that you know, I'll never forget. He said, you know, you kind of tie God's hands when you're sitting still. You know, God can't move a parked car. If you're moving, you know, he can guide you back to the path. And the part that stuck out in my mind was, I need to move. I need to move. I need to move out of this trap house that I'm in. I need to get out of this dope house. So I called a Vietnam veteran friend of mine who I'd stayed with previously. I've known him all my life. And he came, you know, I called him, and he was like, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Came and picked me up, put my stuff in, which wasn't much. You know, when you get into drugs, you sell a lot of things, and, you know, you get into a lot of debt really, really quick trying to support your habit. So I didn't have a whole lot, but I had some, and, you know, we loaded up in the back of his pickup, and he took me to his house. After that, I went to, I decided that I was going to go and move away from Lubbock, right? So I want to continue to move because the moving part was sticking in my mind. So I called up my roommate that was at Waco with me there at the PTSD facility, and he agreed to let me stay at his house. Unfortunately, he had taken back to the drink as well. And so when I got there, I was like, well, I'll just drink a little bit, and I'll be okay, because I'm in a new town, I'm in a new place, I'm going to get my life together, and everything's going to be okay. That lasted about 2 days. I was white knuckling it for about 2 days. Drinking went completely right out of control. And as soon as that happened, I know where to find drugs. You can find drugs anywhere. And so I was right back on it. And the first time I hit my, you know, meth, you know, I remember I lit up a bowl, and then as soon as I did that, I looked over at my phone, and the verse of the day popped up on my phone. And I looked at it, and I was like, oh, man, I got to read this again. Opened it up, and God was just putting it on my heart. He was convicting me. He was like, you know, I created you for something better than this. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to go check into the VA. And I did. I went to Temple, checked in, went to a substance abuse program because they were like, you need to get some sobriety underneath your belt before you can start working on your PTSD stuff. And I remember I was there for about maybe a week and a half. I'd, you know, gotten fairly sober, because it takes a while to get that stuff out of your system.
Yeah.
Gotten fairly sober, and we went into a PTSD education class, and of course, she's writing out the symptoms: anger, hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, mood swings, all of this stuff, homicidal ideation, suicidal ideation. And I rose my hand, and I was like, I have all of those symptoms that you're listing right. I have them all. How do I get rid of them? I don't want to feel that way anymore. And she was like, "Sir, you can't talk about your combat trauma here." And I was just like, I don't know where else to go. Like, where do I go to where do I go? Y'all are my last hope. And luckily for me, there was a guy that had been through the PTSD Foundation of America, Camp Hope. And he was a mentor there, been through and graduated the program. And he was like, "First off, do you have a minute?" And I was like, "I don't know where else I'm going to go." He went and got the Combat Trauma Healing Manual, which is what we work out of. And I read the prologue to it, and it was like it was telling my story, just literally like it was telling my story. And I was like, "Where's this place at?" And I looked on the front of it, and it says Christ-Centered Solutions to Combat Trauma. And he was like, "It's at Houston, Texas." He said, "Let me call my guys." And within 5 days, I arrived at Camp Hope. And once I got to Camp Hope, I literally felt like I was home. The guys came up and were like, "Welcome home." And I'm like, "Look, you guys don't understand. Y'all don't understand. I've been to these programs. I've been through this stuff before. Y'all just don't get it. Y'all ain't gonna understand what I've been through, because I'm the only one that's ever been through this situation." And so one of the mentors comes up, and he's like, "Why don't you tell me what's going on with you?" And I'm like, "Man, I got PTSD, man. You wouldn't understand." And he was like, "Really? I've got 8 tours overseas. Why don't you tell me what's going on with you? I do understand PTSD." And I'm like, "Oh, now I can't hide behind my PTSD no more, right?" So I'm like, "Well, and I've been addicted to drugs and alcohol and forced." He was like, "Yeah, I spent years with a needle in my arm, drinking myself to death. So why don't you tell me what's really going on? What's going on with you?" And I had to sit back and think about it. And I was like, "Man, what is wrong with me?" And I said, "I guess I'm sad because I feel like I'm a piece of crap father. I guess I'm sad because I'm not there for my kids. I guess I'm sad because I'm a monster. I'm sad and angry because I lost my friends." And he was like, "That's something that we can work with. That's something that you can heal from." And which began my journey of learning a new way to live. After being at Camp Hope, they would teach me things like emotional regulation, which one of the key things in there is, I grew up, grown men don't cry and you got to shove your feelings down. It's not true. It's not true. I would learn how to regulate my emotions. I would learn anger management. I would learn, obviously, PTSD education, but not only PTSD education, but coping skills, how to apply them, how to use them, how to test them out. Some of them stupid, but they work. Grounding techniques, mindfulness, cognitive processing therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR. But the biggest thing is the camaraderie that I had missed with my brothers, and being able to share my combat experiences in warrior group. Warrior group is where we talk about our combat trauma. We're able to discuss it together. We're able to work through it together, and come to find out I was not alone. There was about 50 other guys there that have been through the exact same thing that I had been through, maybe in a different time era, but it was the same. It was the same across the board. And of course, it being Christ-centered solutions to combat trauma, I started learning the Bible. I started learning scripture. I started learning who God was. And instead of being mad at him and angry at him and blaming him for what had happened, I realized that, in Ecclesiastes, it says there's a time to kill and a time to heal. My time to kill has gone, but my time to heal is now. And there's only one thing that I have found thus far that can heal a soul wound. And a soul wound is not healed by a pill or by a counselor or by an individual. It has to be bigger than all of that. And I have to be willing to surrender to whatever that is. And for me, it was God. It was me surrendering to him, to his will, and to allow him to love on me and realize that it was men that did those things. It was not God.
So Michael.
So yeah, go ahead.
Man, here in the just watching the clock here, and
oh yeah, sorry, I forgot.
Just here. No. You're good, man. Just here in the last 10 minutes. Let's talk about what message do you have for? Well, first, let's start with what is now. I mean, you graduated from Camp Hope, took you 11 months. You're in a much better place right now.
Oh, yeah.
What is your role right now with Camp Hope, and what message do you have to other veterans who may be listening to this, combat veterans, and going, that's where I'm at? His story is
after graduating, and getting through Camp Hope and being able to deal with all these issues, one of the biggest things is, I said warrior group, is 100% one of the best healing parts of that. So I now run warrior group, and I run a warrior group in the Round Rock area. It's at the City View Bible Church there in Round Rock off of County Road 112. We meet on Thursdays at 6. I also do a first responder group on Tuesdays at 7. And so that's kind of my role now. But one thing that I want to make sure that everyone listening and you understand is PTSD. It is not curable, but it is treatable. And once you become willing to treat PTSD, once I became willing to treat my PTSD, my life got a whole lot better. I still have the PTSD symptoms, but they do not affect me as nearly as much as they used to. I've got over a year clean and sober, for the first time in 2 years, just 4 months ago, my little girls were able to run up and give me a hug and say, "Daddy, where were you? We missed you." They didn't view me as a monster that I thought that I was. And they definitely didn't view me as a monster, but they were like, "Where have you been?" And one of the greatest feelings in my whole life was being able to feel that and to see them and to love on them and to know that they love me too, and to know that I have the opportunities to still be in their life. And I'm still doing that. And it just brings joy to my life. Knowing that, it takes time. It 100% takes time. And there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain from my ex that she's dealing with still, and trying to work my way back into my kid's life. But again, that's part of what I do now, and go ahead.
Well, so I remember you telling me that, you may get a call from a family member who sees that their loved one, a combat vet, suffering from PTSD, is there's something going on with them. They're worried about them. There's signs that maybe he or she may take their own life, and you're one of the guys that goes and checks on them, right? I mean, and
Not just, yes, sir. Yeah, not just checking on them. You know, since being here, I've talked three individuals in just the last 3 months. I've talked three individuals over the phone, um, out of committing suicide and being willing and open to go and experience what Camp Hope has, or at least Warrior Group.
Man, that is great, man.
Well, it's what God put me on this earth to do, in my personal opinion. And there's not a lot of combat veterans out there, and so for a combat vet or a veteran to talk to another veteran is crucial. I mean, it's key in being able to relate, which is what the PTSD program and the PTSD Foundation of America and Camp Hope does. We have a crisis line that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there's a combat veteran on the other end of that line waiting to receive a phone call from a family member, from a veteran themselves, from a spouse, always ready. Yeah. And then we can actually get in contact with that veteran and get them, where they need to be in life, whether that be at Camp Hope, the aftercare after Camp Hope, which is what I do now, with the warrior groups. Like, I continue the warrior groups. These guys coming out of Camp Hope, coming into the Round Rock, Austin, Leander, all this Central Texas area, I get their number and I'm like, okay, you graduated. Awesome. You got a certificate. Cool. You're probably on fire for God right now. You're probably thinking that the world is awesome and you're going to go out and do these great things. And then the world is over here waiting like a freaking baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, ready to bust them in the face. And that's exactly what happens. And what do? They hopefully, they don't hopefully no more. They're going to get a phone call from me and I'm going to ask them where they're at. Get your butt to Warrior Group. If I got to come and pick you up, I don't have those friends anymore that are like, let's go get I'm feeling like crap. Let's go get some shots at the bar. Let's go get drunk. Let's go party. No, I don't have those friends no more. I got these guys now that are like, hey, let's go to a freaking Warrior Group. Let's go to dinner and talk about what's really going on inside of you, and that's the crucial part, I think, about what I'm doing now, and I'm just a volunteer. I don't get paid from the PTSD Foundation to do these things. I host these warrior groups because I literally care about each and every single veteran that's out there. And I'm tired of losing my brothers and sisters to the disease of suicide and PTSD. And the only way that I know that I can step in and help is to be that guy that will go and pick them up out of a hotel room if they got a needle in their arm or a gun in their freaking mouth. I don't care. I will go in there and go get them because I love them and I care about them, and I would much rather hear their story about what happened to them than to hear their obituary.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. Yeah. And on some of these calls, man, do you see yourself?
Oh, man.
Side, man.
So much, and a lot of it's the pride, of not wanting to go get help, or it's not just not wanting to go get help. It's like, man, I'm going to be labeled as a PTSD crazy guy, or, that this fear of asking for help because there's no visible wounds, that you're going to be judged. I felt so judged. And so these guys will get on the phone and be like, no, man, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm fine. Yeah, I drink a little bit, but it's not too much. Yeah, I get arguments sometimes, or I'm a little angry. No, all of it's lies that we tell ourselves, and I see it in myself. I'm like, man, I used to lie to myself all the time and tell me, I would make up reasons or come up with excuses or lie to myself to say that I'm not the guy that needs the help. I'm not the guy that needs for somebody to just hear my story. I don't need that. I'm not missing a leg. I'm not missing an arm. So I'm not the guy with the problem. But yet my family, my friends, my wife, my kids even can see. They're like, Daddy, you're so angry. You're so, and I'm like, no, I'm not. And I get these guys on the phone and it's the exact same thing. They're like, oh no, oh, my mom was the one who called y'all. I'm good. I'm fine. I just drink a little bit. I'm okay.
You know
but
better.
they're not. They're not. And I can sit there and pick it apart. And it's not that I pick them apart. I'm like, well, let me tell you a little bit of my story.
Yeah.
And if it hits home, you know, it hits home. But yeah, if there is a veteran out there that's suffering, man, and when you do this, and what you're doing as far as reaching these veterans and reaching people, please, post our information as far as our crisis line,
Absolutely.
my number,
Okay.
all of that kind of stuff, because that's what we all want to do. No, everybody wants to help a veteran, and everybody out there knows a veteran, or at least knows of someone who knows a veteran. And so the other thing is it gives us the camaraderie to be able to hang out together. It's not always just about the PTSD. It's not always about the loss and the grief, and that is the extremely good part of that. But the other side is we get to go in and share some crazy stories with each other that normal people out in the civilian world would probably put us in jail for. But we get to share those experiences and stories with each other again and rebuild that connection of brotherhood that we've been longing for so long, So.
Yeah. Well, man, I want to end here by thanking you for your service, and what you and the PTSD Foundation of America, what you guys are doing, is clearly saving lives. And in my book, that makes them all heroes. It really does, man. It really does.
Well, Eric, I'm super glad that we were able to, one, just get in contact with each other. I want to thank you very, very much for your support, and for your support, not just for the PTSD Foundation, but for me as a person, man. It was so good just being able to talk with you, hang out, whether it be text messaging or, you're very vital to me in passing this message along, as well as just, being a good friend and a good brother. So thank you for what you're doing with Mind Viking, with having me on this podcast, with your support. And yeah, man, I just want to let you know that.